Hello and welcome to a more perfect podcast. Today I have on the show Border Patrol agent Vincent Vargas. I'm happy to have you on the show.
Happy to be here. Um, I am a former border patrol agent, but I still currently work for the federal government.
Okay. See, I was just gonna ask you, could you introduce yourself further?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Let's see. Uh, I am currently a federal employee for the Border Patrol in a strategic communications position. So I do communications for them and
sure.
develop different products that help elevate the public persona of the Border Patrol.
Mm,
I am former Border Patrol agent. I was a Border Patrol agent for 7 years, and I did most of my career with SOG, which is Special Operations Group. It is the Special
mm,
Operations portion that is kind of the most recognized group of the federal kind of special operations world.
mm.
I was a four star agent, which is a medic, but a medic that is attached to BORTAC. And what else, And I wrote a book about it called Borderline. So that's probably the best example of that world of mine. I have kind of
Yeah.
several other spaces, right? I have a podcast called Borderland that is produced by Ironclad, and we focus a lot on the border crisis. Our goal is to just give experts the platform to kind of tell their piece, their side of their expertise of the
Yeah.
crisis, which is a multi-layered area.
Oh yeah.
Um, and outside of that, we work on several other things like mental health.
Mm. Yeah. Very important nowadays. I'd actually bought your book. And
You're the one.
yeah. I've got it right here. Yeah, buy it, everybody, if you haven't seen it. In your bookstores. It's at Barnes and Noble. That's where I got it.
Yes.
It's a very good book. I didn't finish it before this interview, but I got about halfway through it. So it's a kind of a good foundation. I would say.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so to start off with, Border Patrol. You said it's multi-layered, it's multifaceted. They have a lot of duties, but a lot of people, right? They have some like misconceptions, right? Whether it's media narratives, whether it's other people around them spreading propaganda, etc., etc. Um, you know, People think that they're just there to man the ports of entry, or that they're just there to catch drug smugglers, or these narrow-minded kind of perceptions. So I wanted to ask you, um, what is the day in the day life of a border patrol agent look like? Are agents solely responsible for protecting the border, or is there also a humanitarian side to the job as well?
Yeah. So just your regular border patrol agent, this is a different area than your special operations, which we can talk about later, which I think is important to add.
Mm-hmm.
But a regular border patrol agent, they patrol the borders, right? They protect everything that's within inside of the ports of entry. So the ports of entry is covered by customs, right? They usually wear the blue uniform and they sit there and watch, and they kind of determine who comes in and out of the country at a legal point, right? And so we
Mm-hmm.
all know that there's kind of like a checkpoint that leaves America, goes into Mexico, or the opposite. What a border
Mm-hmm.
patrol covers is everything in between that. And so all the land, I mean, thousands and thousands of miles is what the border patrol is supposed to secure. And when I say secure, right, that's kind of a very broad term. What they
Mm-hmm.
do is they cover down on their, I guess, assigned area. And normally the first thing a border patrol agent does is go down there and they call, radio and say, what was the traffic we had earlier today, or was there anything? And they'll tell them what kind of the history of the day looks like.
Yeah.
From that, the border patrol agent will determine how they move forward for the rest of the day. They usually cut sign is what we call it, and I explain it in the book. Is you're looking for any kind of footprints or disruptions in the soil that is the border wall or kind of on the border line parallel to the border fence. And that would indicate that someone has either jumped the fence, went under the fence, or through the fence to try and attempt to gain access into America without being detected. And the Border Patrol agent's job is to use that skill set on top of kind of a robust system from cameras, sensors, high vis locations, all these different things that they use to try and deter any kind of illegal immigration. And so
Okay.
they use this system to hopefully be able to detect and identify anyone who's coming to the country outside of the port of entry. And that is, I guess, in essence, what the job entails at like the most basic level. What happens once someone is apprehended
Mm-hmm.
changes, right? Things they might have to wear a different hat because once someone
Hmm.
is in America already, if they've gained access to American soil, well, then at that point, it is our obligation as federal agents, in the Constitution to protect those who, even though they have broken the law to get into this country, at that point, once they're in our hands, it is up to us to make sure that they remain safe. And if
Hmm.
potentially they were being extorted by maybe the cartel or a smuggling person currently in their group, it is our job at that time to make a determination of what's happening, how do we keep them safe, so then they
Sure.
can go through due diligence of allowing the law to kind of make a decision on their case. And so that means it might be a humanitarian mission. This might be a rescue effort, right? This might mean that a border patrol agent needs to either provide any kind of medical attention, some kind of call for EMTs to come in and do some kind of rehydration, right? IV bags or whatnot, depending on the type of the year. It
Mm-hmm.
could be reviving someone who struggled to get across the river, who maybe was drowning. It could be a lot of different things. And at the same time, if it was a big enough group, you'd have
Mm-hmm.
to decipher who was there, who was being extorted, who was a potential smuggler. And so that's when the investigative hat has to come on as well. And so an agent's job is to secure the border. But
Mm-hmm.
once there is a moment of apprehension, well, that's where a lot of different things start to change.
Okay. So do you have any? That's a that's a very good detailed view of what a border patrol agent does. It's a lot more complex than say just like being a cop on the block, so to speak. Um, I like to tell stories on this podcast, because I believe
Yeah.
that stories are one of the most effective mediums for conveying information to people. You can hear all these things, and you can look at all those statistics that you want to, but at the end of the day, it's a story that's really going to stick in your head. So my next question to you, kind of branching off of that, is do you have any specific stories about say uh, illegal border crosser that you had to save the life of?
Yeah, my job in the special operations space was a Borstar agent, and what a Borstar
Mm-hmm.
agent's job is search, trauma, and rescue. And so it was originally created to be more of a search and rescue unit that
Mm,
had medical abilities, and that was to protect one our own agents, but two any illegal migrants who tried to come across and potentially got injured. What has evolved into a very robust rescue unit means that we rescue thousands a year due to the conditions, whether it be the water or the heat.
mm,
And multiple times in my career, I have rescued people that were in a bad position. One of the ones I talk about in the book is in the area of Del Rio, Texas. There tends to be massive floods, right? So these flash floods that happen, and you'll see ranches go completely underwater. I'm talking the water elevation sometimes rises up 21 feet. And when I
no kidding.
yeah, it's because there's Lake Amistad, which is in Del Rio, that sometimes the water gets released at times. And then if you couple that with a heavy rain, you'll see it completely elevate the water so high that homes will be underwater. This is not
Christ.
common in the border area. And one time we were in the Cotulla area, and it was just a massive flood. I'm talking 10 feet high of water, where what you would normally see and recognize as high fence, you can't even see the fence. It looks just like straight river.
That's
And we
crazy.
Yeah. And we got a call that there was 6 to 8 individuals who were swept off their trucks. These are big semi trucks were swept off the road, and they were somewhere in a ranch, and they were all standing on the top of it while the water was still rising. And so they were in fear for their life to get swept away by this current. And so we get the call. What we do as Borstar agents is, don't matter where it is, our motto is so others may live. And so we got our
Sure.
vehicle, we got our wetsuits on, we got all of our swift water rescue gear, and we headed down to that area. So they send us grid coordinates, and we just shoot right to that spot. And then it's time for us to look. We got out of the vehicles. It was about 6 of us. We got on our Zodiac boats. It was not smart enough for us to start our motors yet, but what we went ahead and did was just kind of walk with them. So I had water up to my chest as I'm walking, trying to find the bottom of the floor and not step in a cattle guard, which could potentially be, catastrophic because the
Mm.
current is pushed so hard one direction. Eventually, about a mile into the walk of shouting and trying to find them, we found 6 individuals on the top, 6 to 8 individuals. Can't remember because there was 2 boats we ended up getting to load up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when you get to them, these individuals, you would think that working on a border, you're most likely going to be rescuing, illegal migrants. But in this case, these were American citizens who were just working and trying to get past a high point of the water and got swept right off. And so these
Interesting.
these big burly men on the border are, were stranded on the top on their tiptoes of
Yeah.
the top of the truck. And when we got there, they just gave us a big old hug and said, "God bless, thank you so much." And that, like,
Yeah.
embrace was just one of those moments of like, damn, I really love this job because as much as I signed to be a border agent, we're on the border, and if I have to rescue anyone in that border vicinity, I will. And it was just a very fortunate day. We were able to get to them in time. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that's a story of success. There's other stories of call outs, they call it, which we get a call for someone else who calls 911. So sometimes at night, these groups they get scattered because maybe a border agent gets very close to the group that's hiding, right? They're in the bushes or
Mm.
whatnot. And then if the coyote, so the coyote, the smuggler, sees that there's danger, they usually just go right back to Mexico. And so this individual goes right back to Mexico, and this group is scattered now trying to get away from the Border Patrol. Well, at night,
Mm.
it's kind of hard to see them. But during the day, the sun comes up. Sometimes the heat's close to 118 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And so on this day that we got a call that there was a woman who was missing, she called 911 on her phone. We were able to triangulate her location and start to look for her. The other group got there before I did. And when they did, they could see that her feet prints were not in the original location of the original call. People usually tend to get nervous. They think that maybe we're not going to find him. And also, sometimes they're not in the right set of mind. And so this woman ventured off for about another 2 to 3 miles trying to find sanctuary. And by the time the team found her, she was already passed because of dehydration. And
Holy hell.
that's yeah, yeah, and that's the reality of the border. I think Del Rio sector alone last year lost close to 200 migrants who attempted to cross, whether it be by drowning or heat conditions, right? So just how hot it is in the ranches at times, and that's the reality of what we see on the border, and that's something that not every profession, has to go through. That's a different world that
Mm.
border trades see daily.
It kind of makes you. It's got to make you a bit angry. When you know, rescuing people is always a good thing, but it's got to make you mad when you see people, putting their lives in such danger and making this journey, especially with little children, and they must know that they're putting their children at risk. Not so much anger, maybe anger at the immigrants themselves, but more so anger at the authorities and power. I mean, this admittedly was one of my later questions, but I feel like it's better to bring it up now because I heard you do a podcast about it. Um, so we have, let me see here. We have, we have our side of the border, which is obviously our territory, controlled by the the U.S. government and our federal authorities, Drug Enforcement Agency, Border Patrol, um, CBP and whatnot. Then we have the other side of the border, which is the Mexican side. It seems to me like they do like nothing at all. I mean, it seems are they just and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like they're really chock full of corruption or something's going on there that they're just kind of being so lackadaisical about their policy that these people are just able to stream through. So what can you say about the intersection of corruption and government at the southern border?
And we're talking on American side or Mexican side.
Mexican side.
Yeah, well, let me go back when you say it must make you angry. I don't know if it's anger is the term. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a very interesting situation that you have down there because you or I have never been in a position to feel so desperate that we had to run across into another country with our kids.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would almost question like what is so bad for them that they needed to get here that they were willing to risk and their kids, right? So that's a question that none of us will ever be able to answer because we're never in that position. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
really, I do get frustrated with how the cartel and human smuggling organizations take advantage of vulnerable people. That is
Mm. Mm-hmm.
that completely
That's a better way to
uh,
put it.
yeah, that right there frustrates me because these people are very vulnerable. Their lack of maybe knowledge of the system or how they've been kind of manipulated and saying this is how it works or how you should do it
Yeah.
is frustrating because the smuggling organizations are making hand over fist money on just human trafficking, right? Just
Mm.
assisting in all the smuggling. And the crazy part is how they do it is they will no shit give up groups just so they can pass dope or more high value groups on the other side. The cat and mouse game of playing
Yep.
using individuals like pawns, like a chess match.
Yep. I had
Mexico,
Chris Clem. I'm sorry.
no, you're good.
Um, I had a Border Patrol chief on the podcast recently. His name is Chris Clem. And he said that I'm not sure if you know him or not.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay,
Yeah,
cool. He said he was telling me about that. He was telling me about how the cartels will release swaths of people to redirect resources, and they'll redirect these resources so that they can run drugs or run people or run whatever smuggling they want to do on the side.
yeah,
So
yeah. Think of
yeah.
it as the highest paid person gets priority. And
Mm,
so paying me 1,000, they paid me 500. Well, they're shit out of luck. The $1,000 guy go and gets the free pass.
mm.
And it's a business, right? They know how to
Yeah,
run
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
business. And they also know our policies. They also know that every single person at this time during that 4 year period was going to gain
Yeah.
access into America by way of the NTA, right? The claiming asylum. And so when you know that, well, then you're still doing your part as a human smuggling organization of what you promised. But there's some individuals that do not want to be detected. There's some individuals
Mm.
who do not want to go and even seek asylum because there's a background there that they know that we will find and they will get deported immediately. And so there is a business there, right? And there's a strategy that they hold. Mexico definitely definitely has a lot of, and back to your original question is they have a lot of stuff they need to work on, right? There was proof in an interview I did on Borderland. One of the investigative journalists, his name was what's his name? Ventura, Jorge Ventura. He spent some time on the
Sure.
border, and he had proof that the Haitian immigration issue that we have, that Haitians were coming across with Mexico, like almost immigration documents approving them to be asylum into Mexico, and then by way of passing them, continue back through us. So if if you think of it,
Come on,
Mexico
man.
was right. Mexico was given a permission to come in. just by knowing that they're going to continue to move on through, right? And so there's things that that definitely we need to work with our counterpart in Mexico and find a way where we can work together. Now it does look like Scheinbaum, I think her name is the new president.
The new president, yeah, 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 yeah.
It looks like she is now currently working with America and trying to figure out a plan to allow us to deport them to Mexico and from them to hold for the time being of while we're waiting on their immigration status to be identified. So as they wait for their asylum case to be reviewed by an immigration judge, they will be holding them in Mexico, which is going to be fascinating to see because Mexico themselves don't have a very robust system that is of how they hold these migrants and how they plan to like because they're putting them in like almost not concentration camps per se, but they're putting them in some kind of like
Holding facility
holding
would be the
facilities that
would
yeah,
be the
which is
would be the
similar,
best way of saying it.
right, which is similar to a prison, which is similar to a
Yeah,
jail,
yeah,
which is fascinating, right? And
yeah.
so,
It's wild.
yeah, you look, you don't,
It seems like we're gonna see a reboot of the Remain in Mexico policy. I believe it was called.
yeah, exactly. That's what I think is going to happen is,
Yeah.
and be there has to be more done on our side as well. And I'm curious to see what that is. I'm curious to see what implementations happen that help speed up this asylum process, whether to identify whether it's legit or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. How do you like besides that? How do you think we're gonna see this this like very very briefly because I do have some other questions to get to, but how do you think we're going to see this massive deportation operation be carried out? I mean, we're like, there's been some pretty heavy rhetoric around this, whole massive roundup of illegal immigrants in the states and then basically pushing them all out. That's a very broad way of putting it, but
Yeah,
how do you think
yeah.
all this is going to pan out?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to pan out how people are visualizing it. I don't think it's going to be
Yeah.
this unethical, just put them all together and send them out. I think that is the rhetoric. I think that is people are using the media in a way to kind of scare tactics and fearmonger.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure, yeah, of
but
course.
I believe it'll start with having a more strict border policy that's gonna deport immediately from when they enter illegally. I
Hmm.
think it's also going to turn into what it used to be back when Obama was in when he had very strict policies, and so
Yep.
did Trump his first term. So I imagine it's gonna be something like if you break laws, like they're going to be looking for those who break laws, those who get in trouble, those who are identified just easily so ICE can deport them in that capacity. I think you're probably going to
Mm.
see a big hiring for ICE agents. I think there's going to be a big focus on ICE doing more in this coming next 4 years, which means ICE will be more active in their investigations of different businesses that hire illegal immigrants. And I say illegal immigrants in the sense of most people they get it confused, right? There's legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. The illegal immigrants are the ones who have come here across the borders illegally. Legal immigrants, they usually have work visas, right? They're paying their little taxes. They're
Yeah.
they got a lot of these migrants who come for seasonal for for produce and stuff. They have access to America and have all the rights to do what they do. So there's confusion
Yep.
there. I
They
think
have
it's
like H1B. They have
right.
J. Oh my God, I think it's J1 for education.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like
So
that. Yeah.
all of that. I think what was it last year to 2023? There was over 1 million people allowed into America legally by way of the legal system of immigration. So no one has to fear you know, if you have legal status. It's really they're going to be doing further investigations on work and how they hire people and things like that. I think is what's gonna happen. I don't see anyone knocking on doors and saying who's here legally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A whole authoritarian roundup.
no, I think it genuinely
Yeah.
will. a more focused approach on, hey, if they're illegal and they've entered and we're deporting them, and as well as ICE starts to do, what they were known to do is do further investigations and find locations where illegal immigrants were being, employed and shutting those down as well. That's what I believe is going to happen.
Sure, sure, yeah, yeah. So two questions leading off of that. Um, it's been reported, going back to the border. Um, all of this has to do with the border, but that was more domestic policy. Um, it's been recently reported that the incoming administration, Donald Trump's administration, that he wants to designate the cartel as a terrorist organization. Um, how would that change the fight against the narcos? What would that exactly do?
So I've looked into this a little bit, and what this is, what they're hoping to get out of it is that now
Yeah.
that we can military force against the cartel, which means there would have to be a lot of levels of agreement from us and Mexico for us to have cross-border operations.
Mm-hmm.
And if the new president, if she approves this, I think some people think of it as a very kind of aggressive approach. I I am a special operations guy. I know how this works. There'll be a very robust intelligence gathering space, and then on top of that, then there'll be very specific strategic, operations and to dismantle the organization. It's no different than what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so,
Mm.
um, once you pass all the red tape of what both countries agree on, I believe that's when you open up the capabilities of us crossing the border and not causing, any kind of further conflict, but in support of Mexico allowing us to do so. I think that's what it does. Also, it focuses more internally now. Now we start building these targeting packages. We start building the intel on the local groups that have ties to terrorist organizations such as TDA, Tren de Agua, and also some of
Mm-hmm.
these other known gangs that are close ties with the cartel that are assisting in efforts of smuggling. So that'd be, different gangs out there that have been identified in the past. Maybe some of the well-known street gangs, MS-13, blah blah blah, so on and so forth.
Sure, sure, sure. So two things actually off of that. The first one, most related to what you just said. You mentioned Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, so um, you were in the U.S. Army Rangers, before you ever entered Border Patrol, before you became Border Patrol Special Operations. You've pretty much run the gamut. Um, so I wanted to ask you about that. And and I want to give my audience a firsthand account of what exactly goes on overseas with our troops, protecting America and her interests abroad. Um, can you talk to me about some of these operations in the Middle East that you were on, um, and what exactly happened?
Yeah, our job in Ranger Battalion, this is a special operations unit, and our bread and butter is we run missions that were targeted on any kind of terrorist organization, so whether it be Al Qaeda, ISIS, and whatnot, and
Mm-hmm.
we find the value targets that would help dismantle and disrupt those organizations, and we
Mm.
have missions that are to kill or capture. And so, in the events that we gather the intel package that shows maybe the location of where they're at, or some of their partners, people that they hang out with, we build an intel package to say, okay, this is the target, and we you know, conduct operations to kill or capture those individuals. Um,
Yeah.
that is a very, very complex uh, mission set, and it goes with a lot to, it takes a lot of organization, but,
Sure. Yeah.
we were experts at what that was, whether it be by way of vehicle or air assault. We would find their location from different ways of doing that, and then we would conduct a mission to kill or capture those individuals. And when you do that enough, you can dismantle an organization from the inside out, right? Or you slowly chop at that at that organization until you finally get to the ringleader of that. I believe it's the same with even law enforcement officers trying to dismantle kind of uh, gangs or whatnot in their area. Any kind
Mm.
of kind of situation. It's the same thing. You find the small man who gives the information. From there, you gather intel, and it continues to go to the next guy, next guy, next guy. And eventually, you take out a whole organization just by way of information and intel. And I think that's what we do in the military. And when you apprehend certain people, they're able to give information that leads directly back to a potential terrorist threat in America. Well, then overseas we're doing our job, and it is a justified mission.
Mm.
Whether the government put us there to do this or oil or whatever, all that's irrelevant. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
my goal was to
I'm not going to
complete.
go into that
Right,
in
right,
this podcast.
right.
I have a hell of a lot of admiration for our military. I mean, my grandfather was military. Some of my close friends from high school are current military. So, um, and the Rangers are also like, they're the cool guys. So, but are you at liberty to talk about any of those specific operations? You you did write about one of which that you were clearing out a building and that you had a slingshot that you took a light out with
Well,
um, in the
it's two parts.
Rangers.
Yeah, it's two parts. I was on a mission. We were on a mission, and most of our missions are night missions, and so we wear night
Gotcha.
vision. And so in this one, we were using the alley as our means of entry, and we were entering the homes. And as we bounced from house to house to house, at one point there was a very bright white light that was kind of whiting out our nods. Back then, the technology of the night vision didn't do well against white lights.
Mm.
Currently, they actually balance it out very well, but back then it would actually destroy your night vision, and so not destroy it in the sense of like ruin the night vision. It would just make it difficult to use them. And
Yeah.
so I was on the corner with the squad leader at the time, Sean Braza, and we were looking at it. I said, "You mind if I throw a rock, Sean?" He said, "No." And you're not going to hit it. And I threw a rock, and somehow it curved and actually hit the light. And so it was just a really cool moment.
Curveball, baby.
Right. It was a really cool moment, in the
Yeah.
middle of a mission that was something that we laughed about later. That eventually we started thinking about what are some other options in the near future that we can do to help that situation, right? Because
Sure.
uh, it did help the continue on of the mission. And so later on, we started using things like pellet guns and BB guns. And then I found a slingshot, and I brought a slingshot with me on target. And so
Sure.
fast forward, I find myself in Borstar attached to Bortak. We're running a mission, trying to get to a high point so we can see some drug smuggling happening. We had intel on it, but between us and the objective was a herd of these little angry pigs, right? These wild boars, wild pigs that they have.
What?
And so, no one knew that I had a slingshot in my pocket. I pulled the
Oh
slingshot
yeah.
and I smacked him, got him out of there. We were able to get to the objective. We were able to complete the mission. We were able to catch some dope that night because, some outside the box thinking that I learned from my missions in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Damn, that's badass. Yeah. The old becomes new again.
Yeah, I still
Oh.
carry one. I still have one in my tricky bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Did your higher ups so is the Rangers kind of a closed, circuit organization, or did your political higher ups ever like get in the way of your mission? Like you knew on the ground that you had to, do X, Y, and Z, but your political commanders were like, no, you can't do that, and like it caused
Now,
dysfunction.
when you're on target, man, we know what the mission is,
Gotcha.
and
Gotcha.
we we get it done. And who
Gotcha.
runs objective boots on ground is the squad leaders and the platoon sergeant. The platoon sergeant kind of facilitates movement as it goes. The squad leaders make it happen. At that point, the officers kind of take a backseat and allow them to move and kind of
Interesting.
take an overview of the whole thing. We do a lot of planning. I'm thinking before I go out on a mission, I tell you, hey, Here's my, my call sign is this. I'm taking with me these many packs. Here's the weapons I'm taking with me. Here's the location we're going. Here's the entry point. Here's our entrance. Here's our route of travel. Here's our secondary. Here's our third. We
Holy
have
hell.
planned out completely, knowing when this happens, worst case scenario, if this happens, this is what we do. Best case scenario, this is what happens. Like, we give everything before we even leave the gate. Once we get the thumbs up and everything is good to go, then we move on it. But everyone in a leadership position briefs exactly what the plan of operations is for you, for their team, and for the grand scale of the whole mission. And when you're able to get that done, like, everyone knows the job. And so
Sure.
that's how missions go. Now we have quicker responses, right? There's a thing called time sensitive targets. And so once we have information that happens, like, hey, they're here and they're now, that's the same thing. We already know what that brief's going to look like. I go straight to my team. All the squadrons come together. Like, here's the target. Here's where we're going. You're the assault element is first squad. Second squad, you're going to be the perimeter. Third squad, you're going to be assistant. Boom, and we just move on it. And so we're so well trained before we get there. We don't need a lot of information. Rangers, we do what our squad leaders tell us to do. We do what our team leaders tell us to do.
Mm.
We communicate, and that's how we work. And so that unit is a very, very well trained unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were you in the Ranger Battalion? Were you a medic? Were you
Oh, I was an
a sniper
infantryman. Yeah, I was an infantryman. Yeah, I had
infantryman?
a
Okay.
yeah, I had a background in medical because my father's a firefighter medic, and so I went to EMT school at 18 years old. By the time I joined the board, excuse me, the Ranger Battalion, I already had just a regular EMT. Never really used it. I was infantry the whole time, but while I was there in Ranger Battalion, they allowed me to do a lot of medical training during my last deployment. The days we weren't on objectives, I was actually working in the cache where any kind of casualties would come through. I'd help do medical. So that was my first leaning into medical field. When I got into the border patrol, I kind of felt like, my time as a rifleman is kind of past me. I want to do more medical work. I want to be a better medic for the tactical teams, and so I leaned into the medical side of my life.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You can only do. I guess it. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I would assume it takes a toll on you after a while.
Yeah,
Um.
I think my heart changed, and I just wanted to kind of be in the side of it where I can help my men in a different capacity.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Thank you for your service. Um. So so you retired from the Ranger Patrol, or sorry, the Ranger Battalion. My bad. You went to Border Patrol. Um, give me a sense, and it might seem a little bit like an obvious answer, but give me a sense of what the Ranger Battalion training was like versus the Border Patrol training. Which was more difficult? Obviously they must have crossed paths with your experience with the Rangers, and the Border Patrol. Um, uh, can you give me any insight on that?
Yeah. So if we're talking selections, okay, let's just do this. Border Patrol basic training and which would be the academy, and
Mm-hmm.
the Army basic training. The only difference was the Army had a very rigorous military bearing type of environment, right? And so do push-ups, shut your mouth, follow what we say, kind of thing. The
Yeah.
Border Patrol had a more relaxed military version of that. They did have kind of drill sergeants, if you will, the cadre there. They did have a military kind of environment, but it's just kind of more of a paramilitary environment. And so there was a little bit of that, you know, in basic training in the military, you're doing a lot of physical activities. This is physical activity, push-ups, sit-ups, running, row march. You're learning things that you've probably never done in your entire life, like medical, shooting, whatnot. And the border patrol is very similar to that capacity where there's a lot of physical, exertion, PT, all those things. But then you go to the academic side of things. And now you have to learn how to be
Mm.
a law enforcement officer. And the law enforcement officer training is the hard part, right? Where you have to learn law, immigration law, and things like that, which is fraud docs, all these different things that is more the educational piece. So it becomes almost like a military college than anything. Because once you're done with physical fit,
Weird.
yeah, once you're done with the physical fitness training, you're learning how to be a law enforcement officer that can think on his toes, who understands the law, who is able to use that in a sense. And then you're also learning how to use of force in a way where you have to change your posturing depending on what the threat is. And so it is more of like a
Hmm.
law immigration college than it is anything else.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I
yeah,
hadn't thought about that.
yeah, which is cool. I thought it was fun. It was challenging at times, but really, I wasn't a big like academic guy at the time, so the schooling aspect was challenging.
Hmm.
But when you fast forward, when you go to the Ranger selection program compared
Sure.
to the Special Operations selection program for the Border Patrol, man, they compared very, very close in hand. And, my age was different. Obviously, I was a little bit older at the time, probably around 26, 27 when I went through the selection for Borstar. Four-star kicked my
Jesus.
butt. Physically, I thought this is respectable and just as challenging as Ranger selection in a different capacity, in a sense where in Borstar we ran and swam every day, and that could be from 5 to 8 miles in running, and in swimming you could be from just hold breath drills to swimming 2 miles, swimming a mile, depending. And that's every day in selection, outside of all the smoke sessions that happen in between, outside of having to pass certain academic testing, outside of not getting any sleep, and all like the little games that they play in the
Yeah.
barracks. All that stuff that you do in selections, we did it for the Border Patrol, and I was shocked. I was actually surprised. I talked about it in the book later on. When you get to that, you're going to see it was not easy. And just as so in the Ranger Battalion, Ranger selection at RIP was just as challenging. So both of those were hard. I give both of them my respect. I'm a Ranger at heart, but I'm also a Borstar agent at heart for the rest of my life because of the hardships that I endured during training. And so that's how I see it. I believe that if someone's in the special operations in the army, if they're looking for something that they can go into after the military that is on our own soil, that is doing very similar mission set, the Border Patrol Special Operations teams, that's BORTEC and BORSTAR, are the only place you should go because that is a serious mission that most people are not really paying attention to. It's the best kept secret.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A More Perfect Podcast. My interview with Vincent Vargas is going to be continued in the next episode, so if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening via audio, the YouTube channel can be found by searching up A More Perfect Podcast hosted by Dylan on YouTube. Not only was this my first video episode, but it was also my first episode with my new microphone. So hopefully it sounds as good as it looks. Um, I just want to thank you guys for all of your support, and please spread this podcast to all your friends and all your family. It really helps it grow. Not only should you subscribe on the YouTube channel, but you should also follow it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., wherever you're listening. And as always, thank you for listening, and have a more perfect day.